Look at me. Don't look at my disability, or see my chair. Look at me. What if we focused on the person instead of the conditions that they have? What if we go back to basic human communication of saying hello instead of staring? Just say hi. What if we no longer expect the minimum of people with disabilities thinking they may work at McDonald's or some grocery store receiving less than minimum wage? What if this person actually became a lawyer or doctor who went through school just like the able-bodied did, earning that degree? Wouldn't that be an insult to you if others thought that the highest career goal that you can achieve was based on how you look or what's assumed to be your limitations? I don't want interviews for jobs to be about my disability. In fact, none of that is allowed to be on any resume, because legally that cannot be a factor whether or not I get the job. Instead, how about we focus on the fact that I went to 2 high schools in one day? That one of the high schools was a technical school where I studied web design, and I'm now in college studying it as my major. Also, while in high school on my 18th birthday, I passed my first Microsoft certification for web design. That's what's on my resume. Not that I breathe like a walrus dying or that I only have use of one hand. My disability is cerebral palsy, and I also have a tracheostomy breathe tube. I have my trach because my airway was not open like it should have been when I was born. Due to that, I rely on my breathing tube as my main source of breathing. However, I only consider that to be an ability because it gave me a way to breathe on my own. Living with a physical disability myself has caused some setbacks in my own life, and it still does today. Part of the reason as to why it's so difficult is due to the pre-assumptions made by people without disabilities. I know that everyone in the world has some type of disability, but there's still a big difference between seeing me as someone with less ability to do something versus seeing me as someone with a disability. While I can't verbally communicate, I can still communicate. Due to my cerebral palsy, or CP for short, it affects my movement abilities. The exact diagnosis that I have is mixed athetoid spastic diplegia. The athetoid causes shakiness, and the spastic diplegia makes me have spasms at random times throughout my body. This is also why I can't use my left hand as much as I would like, and why I get fatigued faster than an able-bodied person. The cause of cerebral palsy is a brain injury or brain malformation that occurs while the brain is developing before, during, or after birth. As a result of the brain damage during brain development, a child's muscle control, muscle coordination, muscle tone, posture, and balance can be affected. Everything that I've just listed had an effect on my body. As a toddler, I was using a walker, and now I no longer need one. Today I would like to talk about physical disabilities, discussing the disadvantages we face by the community, the limited services we have provided, and the obstacles we still have to go through just to get approved for the service. I know, how surprising. You must have expected my talk to be about how I'm inventing the first time machine. Very disappointing, I know, but give me a few years and we'll see. With all jokes aside, I am here to challenge you and to change your views of the meaning of having a disability. I hate the word disabled. To me, I see it as saying that I can't do anything at all. That's only a personal preference. Instead, I like physically challenged, as in it's physically challenging not to stay in bed on days that I have training at the gym when I can easily text my trainer pretending to be sick. Or that it's physically challenging that I only have one working hand that I do everything with. Let's compare my disability for a moment to someone without it. For someone with my disadvantages, I have to think about how I'm walking with every step I take. How am I standing? Am I walking on my toes? What's the distance that I'll be able to walk until I have my spasms? I get physically tired faster than someone without a disability, and I will start slowing down to rest very quickly. Some days sooner than others. Imagine being in my body, one working hand, constant body spasms that never stops, and never knowing when it'll start or end. Or all of a sudden just losing your balance even when sitting down because your spasms decided to malfunction. Yes, I can get so stiff that I feel like this robot only moving inch by inch instead of a steady movement. Now, I want to discuss the able-bodied person. By definition, able-bodied means someone who is healthy and has no illness, injury, or condition that makes it difficult to do the things that other people do. I've been told how that's still unfair to say because obviously everyone has some disadvantages or something that goes on that we can't see. With all of that being true, think about our culture. Haven't you noticed how society labels people with disabilities as inspirations? I am always seeing videos about how somebody with a physical challenge is inspiring for going to college and having a positive attitude. Yet for someone that's more physically or mentally stable, it's the norm. You're expected to go to college, to be president and to go to work. Of course, you're supposed to go to college after high school because as a society we know you're beneficial to the workforce. Why is that? This is due to a lot of people being oblivious until it's right in their face. It also shows ableism. Ableism is discrimination or prejudice against people who have disabilities. This can take the form of ideas, stereotypes, attitudes, physical barriers in the environment, or larger scale oppression. It is oftentimes unintentional and most people are completely unaware of the impact of their words or actions. You can easily relate this word to feminism and racism, all based on discrimination. One example is someone seeing someone like myself holding hands with their significant other, but mistake them as their caregiver. Or how about praising the able-bodied for simply being a hero just because their best friend is in a wheelchair? I'm constantly experiencing this firsthand. Whether it's at school, at a doctor's appointment, or at a restaurant with family and friends, it doesn't stop. Whenever I'm with other people, the workers never directly talk to me. Personally, I can't stand having appointments with doctors that I hardly see, or when I had new teachers every semester in high school that never knew me. Know why? They never talked directly to me. One teacher kept asking my nurse each morning things like, "Tell Sean I sent something to his email," or "Did Sean do his homework?" This happened all year long, no matter how many times we tried to politely correct him. I remember just being so angry each time. Why aren't you talking to me? How do you not realize after so long that I can hear you? Just questioning that every other day, being in that room for 90 minutes. Why would I be in that class in the first place if I couldn't understand? Or why wouldn't I have an interpreter with me? My nurse was not an interpreter. Other people will have surprised looks on their faces when they realize that I can understand them. I'm 20 years old now, believe me when I say it's no longer funny. At least not to me. Not only do I have to deal with the societal problems, I also have to face the environmental issues as well. Being in a wheelchair has its advantages as well as disadvantages. For instance, it helps get a lot of people around for those unable to walk. It is also helpful for people who can only walk a long time without assistance. However, that doesn't mean there won't be obstacles to get around. There's curb cuts that haven't been made, lack of elevator access, and the unreliability of transportation services. I have needed a wheelchair for a few years when I had broken my femur. There's nothing more irritating than showing up somewhere and there's no wheelchair access. No elevator, no ramps, or any automatic doors that will open up. In the recent years, it has improved tremendously and I am so thrilled about it. Although, it is still a big issue today. At DASA, which stands for Disabled Athletic Sports Association, I work out with my trainer to help with my strength through their functional fitness program. My goal is tailored specifically for gaining my strength and being in better control of my muscles and movements. I think that's what makes me a little different than someone who doesn't have a physical disability. I have to work harder to find and keep my balance throughout the day with daily activities. This is also a safe place to say that my limitations are taken into account, but we find ways to work around it. Thankfully, this does not cause my trainer to take it any easier on me as they would an able-bodied. Like I've mentioned earlier, I don't want to be treated any different from the able-bodied, and DASA does a brilliant job making me feel equal. Another place that I work out is at physical therapy. I've been going to physical therapy and occupational therapy for as long as I can remember. In physical therapy, things are a little different, but for my benefit it goes hand in hand with one another. When in PT my focus is on endurance. My goals have now become distance-based to walk longer distances between needing a break. Ever since I broke my right femur in 2012, my time to be on the treadmill without resting has increased. I have gone from a 5-minute goal to a 40-minute goal. My closest has been 40 minutes. Even with it being so high, it still depends on my body spasms whether or not I make it. Once again, the questions become more frequent on repeat. Am I keeping up with the speed? How am I taking each step? Are my spasms going to mess me up? Will my left hand need to be in the cup holder sooner, or will it be able to hold onto the handle longer? Believe me, the questions never come to an end until I'm sitting. Also, my therapist has to keep reminding me to put my heel down first and to take longer steps. I've always been someone who walks on their toes, and the braces in my shoes help me keep them down, stand up straighter, and walk better. We need more places like these two environments, where disability is overlooked and we focus on the person. What I mean by overlook is we need somewhere that the disability isn't the first thing to notice. The late activist, Stella Young, said it best in her 2011 TED Talk in Sydney: "I want to live in a world where disability is not the exception from the norm. Where a teenager in his or her room watching TV all day is achieving anything because they're sitting down. A world where a student in high school is not surprised that their teacher is in a wheelchair." I remember going to a restaurant with my mother and a couple of friends. We hadn't made it into the building when we were stopped by complete strangers just cheering me on, and telling me I look good. Before I knew the concept of inspiration porn, it was flattering. Now it's annoying because it's saying that people with disabilities aren't expected to be out doing normal social activities. However, it's unfair to think in that way because I have a doctor who has cerebral palsy herself. In fact, that's what she specializes in, and it never gets in the way of her providing me nothing less than spot-on care. To me, it's normal to see people like myself as doctors. Yet, what about lawyers, business owners, or even in politics running to be president? This actually reminds me of a question that was asked in class. We were only supposed to answer yes or no, but it really got me to think about it in depth. The question was, are there any cultural symbols that you're unwilling to use or celebrate? My answer was yes but no. I thought about the handicap sign that in my opinion is so poorly designed. It's a stick figure floating above what looks like a sea that's drunk and it fell over. I don't know, maybe my imagination is just a little more interesting than most. I'm not a graphic designer, but even I know it could be better. I'm just saying. My other problem with it is it categorizes every disability as one. With everyone using this one, not so fascinating sign, how can we know how to help this person? What's the proper way to communicate with this person? It will be difficult for both sides if it's only the worker and the handicapped customer. All that I've mentioned is a part of what needs to continue to progress into a more inclusive and accessible world. From making every curb having a safe cut allowing access for wheelchairs, to giving someone the same equal opportunity to communicate if they're in the wheelchair and not automatically thinking that their disability is both physical and mental, having mutual respect that can be just as successful as the able-bodied and not tagging normal daily activities as huge accomplishments. For a healthcare system that won't fight us on essentials that we need to live. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you listening to me and hopefully learning from me. Yet I'm not trying to be an inspiration every day. Matter of fact, after this I'm going home in my room, turning on YouTube, and eating my big bag of Cheetos. People with disabilities are all fighting for the same thing as the rest of the world. For equality and equal opportunities. When you leave here tonight, I want you to be thinking, how can you become an ally or a better ally for accessibility? What are you probably guilty of doing, to which I'm not judging you at all, that's something you need to stop? What are you going to do the next time you encounter someone who is disabled? Are you going to think they won't understand you and feel bad when you realize that they're mentally capable? Or will you do the opposite, thinking that the person will understand you to only find out that they can't and then talk to the parent or caregiver that they came with? Instead, I am challenging you to focus on the person. Don't get used to talking to the caregiver all the time. If you're an employer, please focus on the resume to determine if the person will be right for the job. When the discussion of the employee's disability needs come into play, that should start once the person is hired, not at the interview. Also, let them come to you. Hear out the accommodations that they are needing, and go from there. Create more handicapped areas for wheelchairs, understand what's really inspiring and what's the norm, and try to empathize instead of sympathize with the disability community. As a society, and individuals, we all have to do our part in breaking those stereotypes, and I hope you join me in doing so. Thank you.